I don't remember the exact moment I started feeling like something was off. Maybe it was the subtle changes in her behavior or the way the atmosphere in the house had shifted. Our marriage had always seemed solid, built on years of shared memories, routines, and a deep understanding of each other. Or so I thought. Emma and I had been together for nearly 15 years. We weren't perfect, no couple is, but we had weathered our share of storms. She was my anchor, my constant, the person who grounded me when life felt chaotic. And for years I believed I was the same for her. But in hindsight, the signs were there. I just chose not to see them. It started with the little things. Emma had always been meticulous about her schedule. But suddenly there were gaps, hours she couldn't account for. She brushed them off as errands or last-minute client meetings. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter or the nightstand, was now always in her hand or tucked away in her bag. She started dressing differently, more polished, more deliberate. When I commented on it, she laughed and said she was trying to feel more confident. I wanted to believe her. Trust was the foundation of our marriage, and the idea that she could be hiding something felt unthinkable. But doubt has a way of creeping in, persistent and insidious. The moment that planted the seed of real suspicion came on an otherwise ordinary Saturday afternoon. Emma was in the living room, scrolling through her phone while I was in the kitchen making lunch. She had her back to me, her posture unusually stiff. As I walked into the room, she quickly locked her phone and placed it face down on the coffee table. It was a small gesture, but it didn't sit right with me. When I asked what she was doing, she shrugged and said she was catching up on emails. Her tone was casual, her smile easy, but something about the moment lingered in my mind. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, the first real pangs of doubt began to take root. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more inconsistencies. Emma's explanations for her late nights grew vaguer, her behavior more erratic. She seemed distracted, her laughter forced, her smiles not quite reaching her eyes. It was as though she was carrying a secret too heavy to bear. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. Then I found the receipt. It was tucked into the pocket of a jacket she had draped over the back of a chair. I wasn't looking for anything. I had simply been moving the jacket to hang it up. The receipt was from a boutique hotel downtown, dated 3 weeks earlier. My heart sank as I stared at the slip of paper, the implications crashing over me like a wave. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had been meeting a client. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. But deep down I knew. The doubt that had been gnawing at the edges of my mind was no longer just doubt. It was suspicion, sharp and undeniable. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying every interaction, every conversation, every moment that had felt off. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Unsure of what to do next, I decided to seek help. Confronting Emma without evidence felt like walking into a minefield. If I was wrong, I risked damaging our marriage irreparably. If I was right, I needed to know the full truth. I contacted a private investigator, a discreet professional who assured me he would uncover the facts without drawing attention. The weeks that followed were some of the longest of my life. The investigator provided regular updates, each one adding to my growing sense of dread. Emma's late nights weren't work-related. She wasn't meeting clients or running errands. The photos the investigator sent me confirmed what I had feared. She was meeting someone else. I stared at the images, a mix of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief coursing through me. Emma, the woman I had shared my life with, was sitting across from another man at a cafe, their body language intimate and familiar. Another photo showed them walking into the same boutique hotel together. It was all there, undeniable and devastating. In the days that followed, I oscillated between rage and sorrow, between wanting to confront her immediately and wanting to disappear altogether. But as the initial shock wore off, a new emotion began to take hold: determination. If Emma thought she could betray me and continue living her double life unchallenged, she was mistaken. I wasn't interested in yelling or fighting. I wanted her to understand the full weight of her actions. I wanted her to face the consequences. I began to formulate a plan, one that would ensure she couldn't lie or manipulate her way out of the situation. I gathered the evidence the investigator had provided, compiling it into a comprehensive file. I consulted a lawyer, laying out the facts and discussing my options. The betrayal was personal, but the fallout would be precise and calculated. At the same time, I began to distance myself emotionally. I stopped asking Emma about her day, stopped engaging in the small rituals that had once defined our relationship. She noticed the change, of course, but she attributed it to work stress. I let her believe that the truth would reveal itself soon enough. As the day of the confrontation approached, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger that had once consumed me had cooled into resolve. I knew what I needed to do, and I was ready to see it through. Emma's betrayal had shattered the foundation of our marriage, but it had also awakened something in me. A clarity, a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. And soon, the woman who had once been my everything would see just how much she had underestimated me. The morning of the confrontation arrived with a quiet stillness that felt almost unnatural. The air in the house was heavy, thick with the tension of unspoken truths. Emma moved about her usual routine as if nothing had changed, unaware that her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. She smiled at me as she sipped her coffee, her expression as serene as ever. It took everything in me not to betray the storm brewing inside. I had planned every detail meticulously. This wasn't going to be an angry shouting match or a chaotic exchange of accusations. I had no interest in giving her the opportunity to twist the narrative or deflect blame. This was going to be a controlled and deliberate dismantling of her lies. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the depth of her betrayal in a way she couldn't ignore. The evidence was laid out in a neat folder, each piece carefully organized and annotated. The photos, the timestamps, the locations, it was all there, irrefutable and damning. I had rehearsed what I would say, how I would present the facts, and how I would handle her inevitable reaction. There would be no room for ambiguity, no chance for her to deny the truth. When the moment finally came, I waited until she was seated at the dining table, her phone resting face down beside her plate. I placed the folder in front of her without a word, watching as confusion flickered across her face. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the folder, as if she already knew that opening it would change everything. As she flipped through the contents, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to something resembling panic. Her hands trembled as she set the folder down, her eyes darting toward me, searching for some sign of leniency. I gave her none. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, until she finally broke it with a stammered attempt at explanation. Her words were a tangled mess of apologies, justifications, and outright denials. She claimed it wasn't what it looked like, that I was misinterpreting the evidence, that I didn't understand the context. But the more she spoke, the more hollow her excuses sounded. I let her talk, watching as her desperation grew with every passing moment. When she finally fell silent, I met her gaze and told her the truth, that I knew everything. The aftermath of the confrontation was both devastating and strangely liberating. Emma's initial denial gave way to anger, then to tears, and finally to resignation. She admitted to the affair, though she downplayed its significance and tried to frame it as a momentary lapse in judgment. But the evidence told a different story. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a calculated betrayal that had been going on for months. I told her I had already consulted a lawyer and that divorce proceedings would begin immediately. Her reaction was a mix of shock and indignation, as if she hadn't fully considered the consequences of her actions. She begged me to reconsider, to give her another chance. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage was shattered, and there was no putting it back together. Over the next few days, Emma moved out of the house, taking only what she could carry. The sight of her empty closet and the absence of her things felt surreal, as if I were living in someone else's life. But as painful as it was, there was also a sense of relief. The weight of her lies was gone, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. Just as I began to settle into my new reality, an unexpected development threw everything into chaos. A package arrived at my doorstep one evening, addressed to me with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note that read, "There's more to the story than you know. You deserve the full truth." I hesitated, the drive sitting heavy in my palm as I debated whether to open it. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to avoid reopening the wounds that were just beginning to heal. But curiosity got the better of me, and I plugged it into my laptop. What I found was a series of files, emails, photos, and documents that painted a far more complex picture than I had anticipated. The man Emma had been seeing wasn't just some random fling or coworker. He was connected to a web of financial and professional dealings that implicated Emma in something much larger than an affair. The evidence suggested she had been complicit in a scheme to embezzle funds from her employer, using their relationship as a cover. My mind raced as I pieced together the implications. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a betrayal of everything I thought I knew about her. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was involved in something criminal. And now I was holding the proof. I spent the next few days in a state of turmoil, torn between conflicting emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication. The affair had been bad enough, but this new revelation confirmed that Emma's deception ran even deeper than I had imagined. On the other hand, I was faced with a difficult decision. What was I supposed to do with this information? Turning her in to the authorities felt like the logical choice, but it also meant exposing myself to scrutiny. If Emma's actions came to light, there was a chance they could drag me into the mess, even if I had no involvement. The thought of being implicated in her crimes was almost too much to bear. I sought advice from my lawyer, who confirmed that the evidence was damning and that I needed to protect myself. We documented everything, ensuring that there was a clear record of my innocence. But even as I took these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Emma wasn't the only one who had something to lose, and I had a sinking suspicion that the man she had been involved with wouldn't go down without a fight. As the days turned into weeks, I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. The house, once filled with reminders of Emma, became a space that was entirely my own. I focused on my work, my friendships, and the things that brought me joy. But in the back of my mind, the knowledge of Emma's actions lingered, a constant reminder of how easily trust can be shattered. And then, just as I thought the worst was behind me, another twist emerged. One that would change everything I thought I knew about betrayal, revenge, and the lengths people will go to protect their secrets. The revelations about Emma's deeper involvement in a criminal scheme haunted me. It was no longer just about the betrayal of our marriage. It was about deception on a level I couldn't have imagined. The Emma I thought I knew had been wearing a mask all along, hiding parts of herself so thoroughly that even I, the person closest to her, had been blind to the truth. As I sifted through the files on the USB drive, I realized the scope of what she had been involved in. Her lover, the man she'd been meeting during her late nights and secretive outings, wasn't just a random fling. He was a key player in an intricate embezzlement operation that had siphoned millions from her employer. And Emma, whether willingly or under pressure, had played a significant role in facilitating the fraud. The more I learned, the clearer it became that Emma wasn't just a pawn in this game. Emails and transaction logs showed her signing off on suspicious accounts, approving transfers to shell companies, and even attending clandestine meetings under the guise of work trips. Her actions weren't those of someone coerced or manipulated. They were the deliberate choices of someone who had fully committed to a double life. My lawyer urged me to tread carefully. If Emma's actions came under investigation, it was vital that I protect myself from any collateral damage. While I had no direct connection to her crimes, the fact that we had shared finances and a home could easily cast suspicion in my direction. We filed legal documents to formally separate our financial accounts and began compiling evidence to prove my ignorance of her activities. Every step felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of uncertainty. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table going through the documents yet again, there was a knock at the door. My heart sank. Visitors had become a rarity since the divorce proceedings began, and an unexpected knock was never a good sign. I opened the door to find a man I didn't recognize standing on the porch. He was tall, with an air of quiet menace that set me instantly on edge. He introduced himself as someone with a vested interest in the situation involving Emma and her lover. His tone was calm, almost friendly, but there was an undercurrent of threat in every word he spoke. He knew about the USB drive, about the files it contained, and about my recent meetings with my lawyer. He made it clear that there were people who wanted this information to disappear, and he strongly suggested that I comply. The encounter left me shaken. It was one thing to uncover Emma's betrayal and the crimes she had been involved in. It was another to find myself in the crosshairs of dangerous individuals. For the first time, I felt truly vulnerable. This wasn't just a personal crisis anymore. It was a dangerous game, and I was now a reluctant participant. Despite the threats, I refused to back down. The files on the USB drive were my only leverage, my only means of protecting myself from whatever fallout might come next. I contacted the private investigator I'd hired earlier, sharing the new evidence and asking him to dig deeper into Emma's lover and his associates. If I was going to navigate this storm, I needed as much information as possible. Over the next few weeks, the investigator uncovered a network of connections that extended far beyond Emma's immediate circle. Her lover was linked to a series of fraudulent companies, each designed to funnel money through a web of transactions that made it nearly impossible to trace. But the most shocking discovery was that Emma wasn't the only one aiding him. There were others, employees, contractors, even clients, all playing their part in the scheme. Armed with this new information, I made a decision. If these people thought they could intimidate me into silence, they were wrong. I compiled everything I had, the files from the USB drive, the investigator's findings, and my own documentation, and arranged a meeting with a federal investigator. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to ensure that the truth came to light. The fallout from my decision was swift and far-reaching. The federal investigation that followed my report uncovered a criminal enterprise larger than anyone had anticipated. Arrests were made, assets were frozen, and the network of fraud that had operated in the shadows for years was finally exposed. Emma's lover was among those taken into custody, his smug confidence replaced by the grim realization that his empire was crumbling. Emma, too, was caught in the dragnet. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and while she initially tried to plead ignorance, it quickly became clear that her involvement couldn't be explained away. Watching the woman I had once loved face the consequences of her actions was a bittersweet experience. There was no satisfaction in seeing her brought low, only a profound sense of loss for what could have been. As the investigation unfolded, I found myself grappling with questions that had no easy answers. Had Emma always been capable of such deception? Or had circumstances pushed her to make choices she would otherwise have avoided? Was she a victim of manipulation? Or had she willingly embraced the role she played? The truth, I realized, was likely somewhere in between. People are rarely as simple as we want them to be, and Emma was no exception. One thing became clear, though: the life we had shared had been built on a foundation of lies. Every memory, every moment, was now tainted by the knowledge of what she had hidden from me. It was a painful realization, but it also brought a strange sense of closure. The person I had loved no longer existed, if she ever had at all. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The house, once a symbol of our shared dreams, became a space entirely my own. I repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and filled the rooms with things that brought me joy. It was a small but meaningful way to reclaim my identity and move forward. Work became a refuge, a place where I could channel my energy into something productive. My colleagues, aware of the upheaval in my personal life, offered their support in quiet but meaningful ways. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. Ethan, my son, was my anchor through it all. His resilience and unshakable optimism reminded me of what truly mattered. Together, we built new routines, new traditions, and a new sense of normalcy. He was too young to fully understand the complexity of what had happened, but his presence was a constant source of strength. Just as I thought the chapter was closing, another twist emerged. One evening, as I sorted through a pile of mail, I came across an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short message. There are still pieces missing. If you want the whole truth, follow the trail. Accompanying the note was a photograph of Emma and her lover, taken years earlier at an event I didn't recognize. On the back of the photo was a date and a location. My curiosity, tempered by caution, flared to life once more. Against my better judgment, I knew I had to see it through. The story, it seemed, wasn't over yet. The envelope's cryptic message and the photograph inside haunted me for days. The date and location scrawled on the back were from years ago, well before Emma and I had started experiencing any visible cracks in our marriage. I couldn't help but wonder what this new trail would uncover. Was it another betrayal? Or something even more sinister than what I'd already discovered? Curiosity gnawed at me, but so did caution. I'd seen how far Emma's deception had gone, and how much damage it had caused. The last thing I wanted was to uncover more truths that could threaten the fragile sense of stability I'd managed to build. Yet, something about the note demanded my attention. It was as if someone wanted me to see the entire picture, no matter how painful it might be. The date and location led me to a small town 2 hours away. It was the kind of place where life moved slower, the streets lined with antique shops and family-run diners. The photograph had been taken in front of a modest community center, a detail that seemed unremarkable at first. But when I arrived, I noticed a faded plaque near the entrance. Annual Small Business Development Conference, 2015. I felt a chill run through me as I pieced it together. Emma had attended this conference that year, claiming it was a networking opportunity for her design business. I'd thought nothing of it at the time, even encouraging her to go. She'd returned home full of stories about potential clients and collaborations, her excitement infectious. But now, with everything I knew, that memory felt tainted. I began asking questions, starting with the community center staff. Most people had little to offer. 8 years was a long time and memories fade. But one older receptionist remembered Emma. She mentioned that Emma had attended with a man, someone she'd assumed was her business partner. When I pressed for more details, the receptionist described a tall, dark-haired man with an expensive watch and a confident demeanor. It was a description that matched Emma's lover perfectly. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment affair. Their connection had started long before I had even suspected anything. They'd built their betrayal over years, layer by layer, while I had been blissfully ignorant. The revelation felt like a fresh wound, reopening old scars I thought had begun to heal. The next step was clear, though it filled me with dread. I needed to confront the person who had sent the envelope. If they had access to this information, they might know even more than I did. The note hadn't included a name, but the investigator I had worked with before was able to trace the envelope's origin to a local courier service. After some digging, he uncovered the sender, Valerie Hayes, a name I didn't recognize. Valerie agreed to meet me at a diner in the same town. She was a striking woman in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wasted no time with pleasantries, launching straight into why she had contacted me. She had been involved with Emma's lover. His name was Marcus, she revealed, but their relationship had ended badly. She claimed Marcus had manipulated her, using her connections to further his schemes before discarding her when she was no longer useful. Her bitterness was palpable, but so was her determination. Valerie had spent years collecting evidence against Marcus, hoping to expose him for what he truly was. But she'd been too scared to go public, fearing the consequences. When she learned about the federal investigation I had initiated, she saw an opportunity to finally bring him down, and to warn me about just how deep the rabbit hole went. Valerie painted a chilling picture of Marcus. He wasn't just a con man. He was a predator, skilled at identifying vulnerabilities and exploiting them. He had charmed his way into Emma's life much the same way he had charmed Valerie, presenting himself as a suave, successful businessman with all the answers. But beneath the polished exterior was a man driven by greed and control. According to Valerie, Marcus had a history of targeting women who could help him further his schemes. Emma, with her connections in the design world and her access to high-profile clients, had been the perfect accomplice. Valerie hinted that Marcus had likely pressured Emma into her role, though she stopped short of absolving Emma entirely. She handed me another envelope, this one filled with documents and photographs that corroborated her story. Among the papers was a detailed timeline of Marcus's activities, including his involvement with Emma at the conference in 2015. There were also emails between Marcus and Emma, discussing plans that extended well beyond their affair. It was clear that their relationship wasn't just personal. It was a calculated partnership built on lies and manipulation. As I drove home, my mind churned with conflicting emotions. Valerie's revelations had given me a clearer picture of who Marcus was, but they had also forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth about Emma. Had she been a willing participant in his schemes, or had she been coerced? The emails suggested a mix of both. She had shown hesitation in some messages, questioning the legality of their actions. But in others, she seemed fully committed, even enthusiastic. It was a complexity I hadn't been prepared to face. I had spent so much time viewing Emma as the villain in my story that I hadn't considered the possibility that she might also be a victim. But even if she had been manipulated, it didn't excuse her choices or the pain she had caused. She had betrayed me, not just as a husband but as a partner and confidant. That fact remained, no matter what her motivations had been. With Valerie's information in hand, I met with the federal investigator handling Marcus's case. The new evidence was a game-changer, providing crucial context that tied Marcus's past activities to his current crimes. It also painted a more nuanced picture of Emma's role, which the investigators agreed to take into account as they built their case. But there was one piece of unfinished business: confronting Emma. I needed to hear her side of the story, not for closure but for clarity. I arranged to meet her in a neutral location, a quiet park where we wouldn't be overheard. When she arrived, she looked wary, as if she already knew that I had uncovered more than she had ever intended me to. I laid everything out: the photograph, the documents, Valerie's testimony. Emma's reaction was a mix of shock, guilt, and defiance. She admitted to being drawn into Marcus's orbit, describing him as both intoxicating and terrifying. She claimed she had wanted to back out multiple times but had felt trapped, fearing what Marcus might do if she tried to leave. Yet, as she spoke, there were moments when her excuses rang hollow, her words too rehearsed to be entirely truthful. When I asked her why she hadn't come to me, why she hadn't trusted me enough to ask for help, she looked away. Her silence spoke volumes. Whatever the reasons for her actions, she had made her choices, and those choices had led us to this point. By the time I walked away from that conversation, I felt a sense of finality. There was nothing more to uncover, no more truths to drag into the light. Emma's story was one of betrayal, yes, but also of weakness and compromise. It was a reminder that even the people we think we know best are capable of things we can't imagine. The federal investigation eventually led to Marcus's conviction, along with several of his associates. Emma, though implicated, cooperated with authorities and avoided prison time. She disappeared from my life after the divorce was finalized, moving to another state to start over. I wished her no ill will, but I had no interest in ever seeing her again. For me, the ordeal was both a reckoning and a rebirth. It forced me to confront the fragility of trust and the complexity of human nature. But it also showed me my own resilience, my ability to rebuild even when the foundation of my life had been shattered. As I stood in the kitchen one evening, watching Ethan work on a school project at the dining table, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past still lingered, its scars a permanent part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found my way through the shadows, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace the light. The final months of the investigation passed in a haze of legal updates, quiet reflections, and the faint hope that life might soon return to some semblance of normalcy. Marcus was in custody, his empire dismantled, and the last threads of his criminal network were being picked apart by federal agents. Emma's involvement, though significant, had been mitigated by her cooperation with authorities. She had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Marcus in exchange for reduced charges. The consequences for her were far-reaching but not life-destroying. A fitting outcome, I supposed, given her role as both victim and accomplice. For me, the chaos left a void that I struggled to fill. The clarity I had sought through uncovering the truth had come at a price. My trust in others, my sense of security, even my faith in my own judgment, all had been shaken. Yet, in the quiet moments of reflection, I began to see the experience not just as an end, but as a beginning. The life I had known was gone, but in its place was the opportunity to rebuild, to redefine who I was and what I wanted. The day of Marcus's sentencing arrived with an air of grim finality. The courtroom was packed, the tension palpable as the judge delivered the verdict. Marcus was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, his crimes laid bare for all to see. The media coverage was relentless, painting him as the mastermind of a sprawling criminal enterprise. Emma's name was mentioned only in passing, her cooperation earning her leniency and sparing her the brunt of public scrutiny. As I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching the proceedings unfold, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing justice served, but also a lingering sadness for the years I had lost, the illusions that had been shattered. When it was over, I left without speaking to Emma. There was nothing more to say. Life after the trial was quieter, more focused. Ethan and I settled into a routine that was both comforting and healing. He was too young to fully grasp the complexity of what had happened, but his resilience was a constant reminder of the strength we both possessed. Together, we built new traditions, finding joy in the small moments that made up our days. I threw myself into work, taking on new challenges and finding a sense of purpose in the stability it provided. My colleagues, aware of the turmoil I had endured, offered their support in subtle but meaningful ways. The friendships I forged during that time became a cornerstone of my recovery, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there are people who stand by you. Months later, as the leaves began to turn and the crispness of autumn filled the air, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, but the return address caught my attention. A women's correctional facility in another state. My heart sank as I opened it, finding a neatly folded piece of paper inside. It was from Emma. Her words were measured, her tone reflective. She wrote about the choices she had made, the regrets she carried, and the lessons she had learned. She apologized again, not for the first time, but this time her apology felt different. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness or reconciliation. It was an acknowledgement of the pain she had caused and a recognition of the strength it had taken for me to move forward without her. She ended the letter with a simple request, that I remember the good times we shared, even as I moved on. She asked for nothing else, only that her memory not be defined solely by her mistakes. A year after the trial, I had a chance encounter that brought the past full circle. I was attending a networking event for work when I spotted Valerie across the room. She looked different, more confident, more at peace. I approached her, and we exchanged polite pleasantries before delving into a conversation that felt surprisingly natural. Valerie spoke about how the events surrounding Marcus had forced her to reevaluate her life, to confront her own vulnerabilities and make changes. She had started a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse, using her experience as both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. Her resilience was striking, a testament to the strength that can emerge from even the darkest situations. As we parted ways that evening, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Valerie's journey mirrored my own in many ways, and seeing her thriving reminded me that healing was not only possible, but inevitable with time and effort. Just when I thought the chapter was closed, life delivered one final twist. I received a call from the federal investigator who had handled Marcus's case. He wanted to inform me that a new development had come to light. Marcus had hidden assets that were now being recovered. Among them was a trust fund he had set up using embezzled money, a portion of which had been tied to Emma's name. The investigator assured me that I had no legal obligation to the funds, but he wanted to offer me the opportunity to redirect them. It was a symbolic gesture, a way to turn something tainted into something positive. After some thought, I decided to donate the money to Valerie's nonprofit. It felt like the right thing to do, a way to close the book on this chapter of my life while contributing to a cause that could help others avoid the pain I had endured. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that has happened, I feel a sense of peace I never thought I would find. The journey has been long and painful, but it has also been transformative. I am not the same person I was when this all began, and for that I am grateful. Ethan continues to be my greatest source of joy, his laughter a daily reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Together, we have built a life that is honest, authentic, and filled with hope. The scars of the past remain, but they no longer define me. They are simply part of my story, a story that is still being written. In the end, I have come to understand that betrayal, loss, and pain are not the end of the road. They are stepping stones on the path to something greater. And as I look toward the future, I feel ready to embrace whatever comes next.